I think we need to look beyond what was taught glibly at school and to think of the real reasons behind the Battle of Gate Pa.
The sanitised version that we have got of the land wars from the victors is a long way from the truth. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for the community of Tauranga to engage with our history and to learn about what happened in the past and how we've gotten to the point that we are today.
It just needs to be acknowledged that at that time Maori got overwhelmed by the very thing that the missionaries and Maori were concerned about in this area, which was colonisation.
If only our ancestors had paused and arbitrated, we might not have seen the deterioration of the relationship between particularly the CMS mission and Māori.
Our family history has it that the relationships that existed in those days around the time of the Battle of Gate Pa and afterwards were community and relational in a good sense.
The battles were about land, about people wanting land, and that goes for all battles, not just for Pukehinahina. And so if you use that as your start point, then you get the idea of the rest of the picture.
As far as my ancestors were concerned, they were put up against a wall with guns aiming at them. In fact, they had signed 24 years earlier a treaty that said something totally different to what actually happened on this hill. That treaty is Waitangi.
It's all about relationships, you know, for Nungatanga, so sometimes we just got to let the history lay. Let's not burden our next generations with what we still carry in a sense.
Before the battle, people here in Tauranga, people were going about their business, being gardeners, being fisher folk, enjoying the fruits of their labours.
On the 21st of January 1864, warships sailed into the harbour, preparing to blockade it. They took control of the mission station, set up two redoubts there, the Monmouth and the Durham redoubts, and turned it into Camp Te Papa, a military fortification.
An interesting time for our people going back into war, something that they wouldn't have been familiar with for quite a long time. So I think there would have been a lot of reluctance, and then when the troops actually arrived in Tauranga, then a feeling of inevitability. Well, we don't want to fight this fight, but if we're going to do it the best way we can. And so our warriors prepared themselves for battle as they always had.
A group of people had prepared Pukehinahina for battle and had actually invited the British troops to come and fight the battle. The British troops probably took a little longer than they intended to get it together because they were awaiting these cannon.
Cameron opened fire on the Pa on the morning of the 29th of April, and he bombarded it for most of the day with a very heavy artillery bombardment. And they confidently thought that most of the warriors inside the Pa would have been killed.
For Maori, this was an outstanding victory that very, very few Indigenous people groups ever managed to achieve over British forces that were rampant around the world at the time.
In reflection later, we call it a victory, but no one ever is a victor out of war. And even if you do a body count or afterwards, everyone would have felt like they'd had a great loss after that battle.
Many of these warriors were outstanding Christians, and they decided although they were going to fight, they were going to fight in a way that was honourable. And that's where the story of Hene Te Kiri Karamu comes from, the giving the water to Colonel Booth.
She was the one female, I believe, who participated in Pukehinahina and was known to take water to the injured soldiers, British soldiers.
The whole thing about that verse, if your enemy hungers, give him food, if he thirsts, give him water. Well, the verses prior to that talk about your relationships and the right relationships you should have with your neighbours, your people. And the verse after it says, don't repay evil with evil.
the British had very good intelligence. They knew what was going on, and the morning that the warriors started to dig at Tauranga, Colonel Greer was able to get out there with quite a sizable force and attack them. And this time they didn't have the 2.5 weeks of digging and fortifications. They were actually caught in the open in very shallow trenches, and they were swept off the position very quickly.
If you understand what the morale was like of the British at that time, they needed to be able to gain respect, and also they lost a lot of friends at Gate Pa, so it was very much for them taking back or getting one back over the Māori forces at that time. So Tauranga wasn't a fight. It wasn't a battle, it was a massacre.
We also had a man of the cloth, if you like, Henare Taratoa, and he was a man of the cloth being brought up in the Anglican Church. He understood the ways of the church, he understood the ways of Pākehā. He also understood the ways of war. There were two sides to him. And he was a very educated and learned man in both worlds.
Really, he epitomised what it was all about. He was a Maori who had accepted European way of life, he'd accepted Christianity, and he was a profound Christian, and he believed and lived the Christian life.
These rules for engagement, written on the day by Henare Taratoa, possibly actually devised by Rahiri Puhiraki, according to James Bellish. And the letters that he has found in the archives show that they predate the Geneva Convention for the treatment of prisoners, which is pretty remarkable, really.
When we moved to the Bush campaign, then you just got families. The families are being hit. And not only that, they're also identified by the iwi they belong to. And it was only that iwi being hit.
There were generations, there were whānau who were suddenly cut off so that they no longer had uri coming through, and that is a major sad point for us this day.
My grandfather came and bought a property in Paispa Road, just 100 metres or so from the Battle of Tauranga. That was in 1918. It was only 54 years after the battle. So this is living history. The hurt, the pain and the anger for many of the tangata whenua is still there.
The subsequent invasion of settlers to this area obliterated any memory of Maori, and that's reflected in the place names that actually celebrate those people who actually failed on the day.
I'm hoping that we have come of age where we actually will be able to reflect, commemorate, and mourn the loss of those who went in these battles on both sides, and be able to take the lessons to make a better future for our children. That would be the most wonderful thing to be able to do.
Perhaps the most important thing to remember is the promise found out of the Battle of Gate Pa of better days ahead. For standing out through the battle was the chivalry and Christianity of the Māoris, who without fuss carried out the old biblical verse, if thine enemy hunger, feed him, and if he thirst, give him drink.
This story needed to be told, and I've always believed if you want to grow free-range kids, feed them backyard stories. And this is the backyard story of Tauranga that hasn't been told. So what an opportunity that we've got to do it, because we won't be doing it in my lifetime again, because in 50 years' time I'll probably be in another storyland.
We have to somehow try and get in someone else's shoes and walk their journey for a while and imagine what life's been like for them before we can really come together and understand each other.
8 years we started with Te Koinga, where we started doing this annually out at Tiranga and here. Just a little gathering of people that wanted to get past the blame game and start looking forward to the opportunities of reconciliation.
I'm not a person who wants future generations to carry the burden or grievance or any guilt. That was carried to the grave by our previous generations. Now is the time for reflection and commemoration and doing what we preach.